The government side in this debate, whether they realize it or not, is hurting the poorest children the most. It's giving away already limited public funds to private schools, which are often elitist and even discriminatory. They condemn most poor kids of color to a life of poverty by taking away from them the ability to get a decent education in the public schools. We're more than proud to stand on the side of equal opportunity in this debate. Side opposition. We on our side oppose any voucher programs, and we believe state funding should go directly to public schools and no public funds should be allocated to private schools in this debate. We're going to talk about three main things today. First of all, why this policy harms the poorest children the most. Second of all, why private and religious schools are often harmful to the child. And third of all, how non-public schools misappropriate the public money that they're given. But first of all, let's go through some minor rebuttal that we heard from side about the things we heard from side proposition today. They told to us how it is better for individual children, how state schools are chronically underfunded and failing, but we believe that with their policy they're making public schools even more underfunded, even less likely to ever fix their problems, even less likely to ever propose a decent education to some children, which we believe harms a horrible part of the children in their world. Second of all, they told us how children learn better in an environment where they feel comfortable, and this is a direct clash with the things that we're going to talk to you about today. We believe that it doesn't matter how children feel if they don't receive a decent education, which we will prove to you that private and public schools often do, because they teach non-full information. They teach this, and they teach discriminatory information, such as schools that discriminate against LGBTQ youth. Then they also talk to us about how they talk to us about how public schools will attract enough students to be good. But when in the status quo you have public schools which are failing and which are underfunded, taking away part of their funds will in no way fix their problems, which we're going to talk to you about today. Moving on to our own constructive. First of all, we will talk to you about why this policy harms the poor children the most. Okay, it is true that in the status quo public schools have a lack of funding. Side prop, however, makes it worse by sending a huge amount of the funds intended to go to these schools to the private sector. What does this mean? A. The kids left behind will be the poorest one. Middle class kids will actually have the funds to afford to go to a private institution, and they will have the money to pay the additional fees, but the poorest children will not. This means that all the negative aspects of public schooling will get much worse because you are taking a part of the funding away from these kids. And what they told you about how these schools will fundraise, about how these schools will actually find money from somewhere in order to become more appealing. No, they won't. Simply because when you take away a part of the money, you cannot buy new books, you cannot buy new equipment, which will make this school better for these kids. Then we believe that in these schools there will be less teachers, less of an ability to buy books of materials, less money for repairing facilities, and etc. And all of this condemns thousands of poor kids to not graduating high schools, thereby not being able to get good jobs. Very often you have these people living a life of poverty, a life of crime, and a life of substance abuse, which we on our side are trying to protect for these children. On our side, public schools have been getting better and better, and as more funding has been allocated to them. For example, currently the dropout rates are around 5%, the lowest they have ever been, and Side Prop today tries to disrupt this and fully condemn this development that we have seen. B. Another level of analysis here. It decreases the political capital to have more funding go to public schools. Okay, they're underfunded, and if a large amount of that money goes into the private sector, to private and religious institutions, end results of the kids are actually getting worse in public schools, because when you don't have funds, you cannot have good teachers. We believe that it will be very hard to justify some tax increases to get the much needed funding to go to these schools, meaning that the political capital will drop. C, another level of analysis here. In the long term, we believe those students who have less funding and less students, and many schools will have to close down. This worsens the situation of the poorest in a number of ways. A, the cost of sending your kids to school increases. Why? Because there are additional transportation costs. If there isn't a school in your district, you have to send your child to a school in another district, which will be very problematic if you don't have money for the bus or if you don't have a car. And this not only time-wise, but also not only money-wise, but also time-wise, simply because there will be more time needed for this child to go to school. B, this puts a strain on other schools in the area. Since the kids from the school that closed down would be going over there, this means that other school has to spend more, classes are larger because you have more kids in attending this school, and also teachers are overworked because they have more kids to actually work with. And we believe that this is very, very bad. And C here, it disrupts the child's learning process because it is demotivating to see your school going broke and the school in your district going broke. And it's often very hard to adapt the environment to a new school that is a new area quite far away from you, especially when you don't have another chance, with side prop is triangly active to do today. Moving on to my second constructive. Why private and religious schools are often harmful to the child. Here once again two levels of analysis. A, we believe that those schools often teach harmful things. The best schools are the private and religious schools. This is because they A, make a profit and are able to buy better facilities and pay for better teachers. B, they often have wealthy donors who donate large sums because of their religious or theological beliefs. For example, Jewish schools in the US or Germany, which are funded by wealthy Jewish people from around the world. But however, very often these very, very good schools teach homophobia and creationism. For example, Lighthouse Christian Academy in Bloomington, which teaches active discrimination against LGBTQ people. This creates actually an environment where homophobic abuse is perpetrated and tolerated. And anti-scientific beliefs like creationism are also harmful, as they pave the way for distrust in the scientific community on important issues such as climate change. But here, moving on to the individual, and why is it so harmful to them? Those schools often teach abstinence, often teach shaming young girls into not having sex and making them believe that if they do, they'd go to hell and no one would ever love them. This is very problematic for the self-esteem of a very young girl. Here, moving on to the next level of analysis. Why there are often bad environments for poor students and minority students? Well, they are majority white schools, and white kids tend to discriminate against children of color. Black kids come into the school and try to get a good education only to find out that they are socially excluded and sometimes even bullied for who they are. We believe that poor students get ridiculed for the clothes they wear, and the fact that they don't have the most modern phones, the fact that their parents are constantly working, or the fact that they aren't living in this big mansion. And we believe that these schools often lack black teachers also, and black kids cannot relate to someone and look up to someone. And this is hugely important, as white teachers see black kids as having less potential and often make them give them harsher punishments if they misbehave. And all of these mean that even if a child can hypothetically get a better education, it doesn't feel okay. And this is what we stand on side opposition today, that this is the most important thing.